preparing, so very shortly.
Can we record as well, please, Elaine? Yeah, I'm sure
I've
you are
just clicked
doing. Yeah,
record.
thank you.
If everybody could just, when they get the recording, just accept it. I can confirm, Chairman, that we're now live streaming.
Right. Are we waiting for Rob Barlow or are we going to start? Any advice?
Your Chairman, David, start.
Okay then, we will start. Good evening. A warm welcome to all councillors and officers attending this council meeting and to members of the public and press viewing the meeting via the live stream. I hope you are all keeping well and my best wishes go out to you all in what are still difficult times for many people. I'm Councillor David Andrews and I'm the Chairman of East Lindsey District Council. This is our third remote meeting of full council under the new government legislation. To help assist us with the smooth running of this meeting, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping rules. Firstly, please only turn on your microphone when speaking. This is really important, otherwise the audio will become unclear with background noise. If you wish to speak in the meeting, please press the blue raised hand button on the participants list. I will then invite councillors to speak in order that they have requested to speak. As usual, a councillor can speak for up to 5 minutes on any item. A democratic service officer will verbally notify the councillor when 30 seconds are remaining and when 5 minutes are complete. If you need to leave the meeting, please verbally let me and the meeting know this before you leave. Otherwise, we won't know if you meant to leave the meeting or you had left due to a connectivity issue. A reminder that we have exempt items at the end of the agenda and we will vote to go into exempt session before considering these items. The public streaming of the meeting will be ceased upon entering an exempt session. Finally, if you experience any connectivity issues, please contact Elaine Speed or Joanne Patterson on the contact numbers that you have been provided. Our officers will be supporting us during this meeting. And on that note, I'll hand over to Anne Good for item 1 to take the record of attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just read through the names, please, councillors, if you could just confirm that you are present. Councillor Terry Aldridge.
Present.
Councillor David Andrews.
Present.
Councillor Tom Ashton.
Present.
Councillor Councillor Richard Avison.
Present.
Councillor Stan Avison.
Present.
Councillor Adrian Benjamin. Councillor Wendy Bowkett.
Present.
Councillor Billy Brooks.
Present.
Councillor Danny Brooks.
Present.
Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Present.
Councillor Trevor Burnham.
Present.
Councillor Sandra Campbell-Wardman.
Present.
Councillor Graham Cullen.
Present.
Councillor Richard Cunnington.
Present.
Councillor Mark Dannett.
Present.
Councillor Colin Davey.
Present.
Councillor Sid Dennis.
I believe
Councillor
he's
Sarah
trying to, sorry, and I believe he's trying to connect.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Leyland. Councillor Sarah Devereux.
Present.
Councillor Colleen Dickinson. Councillor Dickinson.
She's around.
I thought I'd seen her.
Hopefully,
I'll come back to her in a moment.
Just recently.
Councillor Dick Edgington. Councillor Edgington.
Apologies for councillor Edgington. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Eyre,
Present.
councillor Martin Foster,
Present.
councillor Richard Fry,
Present.
councillor William Gray,
Present.
councillor Chris Green,
Present.
councillor Adam Grist,
Present.
councillor Will Grover,
Possibly arriving late.
you. Councillor Alex Hall,
Present.
councillor David Hall,
Present.
councillor Sandra Harrison,
Present.
councillor Paul Hibbett Greaves,
Present.
councillor George Horton,
Present.
councillor Tony Howard,
Present.
councillor Ros Jackson,
Present.
councillor Neil Jones,
Present.
councillor Thomas Kemp,
Present.
councillor Steve Kirk, councillor Kirk, no. Councillor Terry Knowles,
Present.
councillor Andrew Leonard,
Present.
councillor Craig Leyland,
Present.
councillor Jill Makinson Sanders,
Yes, present here.
councillor David Manjon. Thank you. Councillor Graham Marsh,
Present.
councillor Fiona Martin,
Present.
councillor Helen Matthews,
Present.
councillor Steve Millen is an apology, councillor Daniel McNally,
Present.
councillor Edward Mossop,
Present.
councillor Claire Newman,
Present.
councillor Sarah Parkin is an apology, councillor Julie Platt,
Present.
councillor Paul Rickett,
Present.
councillor Phil Smith,
Present.
councillor Jim Swanson,
Present.
councillor Mel Turton Levers. That may be an apology. Thank you, an apology. I'll just come back, Chairman, to councillor Benjamin, just check that councillor Benjamin isn't with us at the moment. No, and councillor Dennis not with us at the moment. Councillor Dickinson,
Present.
thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Right, item 2 on the agenda, disclosure of interest, if any. Has anyone got any disclosures of interest? No? Okay, thank you. Item
I'm-
3,
Excuse
Sorry.
me, I've got my hand up.
right,
I declare an interest because my son works in economic development.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you, councillor. Item 3, the minutes, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of June 2020 and the minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 30th of June. Am I a proposer, please?
Happy to propose, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, am I a seconder, please?
Yes, I'll be happy to second those, Chairman. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Now, if no one has anything to say about the minutes, I will take them as read. Has anyone got any comments on the minutes, please? Okay, well, I will propose that the minutes be taken, both sets of minutes be taken as read. Is that seconded, please?
Yep, I'll second that, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is action sheets. Has Rob Barlow arrived yet?
Yeah, I'm here, Chairman. All those actions have now been completed. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Item 5, communications from the chairman. Not much going on, got nothing to report at this stage. Thank you. Item 6, questions by the public. We did have one question. I don't think there's a supplementary. So that question will be added to the minutes. Thank you. Item 7, report of the chairman of the exec board. Councillor Leyland, please.
Thank you, Chairman. You have it was going to be a verbal report, but the report was sent out yesterday, I believe, and I apologise for the short notice. There's been lots going on. In respect of COVID-19 business support, you can see how well our teams have done in delivering 84% of the grant that we had available to just under 4,000 businesses, which I think is an exceptional record of achievement, and very well done to those officers. And I'm pleased that that's gone so well. There's still a number of applications coming in. The second scheme, the discretionary scheme, has been fully allocated with 283 applications, and that was run between the 3rd of June and 9th of, were received for new discretionary funds between the 3rd of June and 9th of June. And we've successfully delivered for 210 businesses, £2.74 million, and that's quite significant as well. We have written to the Secretary of State with support from our MP, Matt Warman, to ring fence the remaining business grant funding on the first scheme to support businesses which have been significantly adversely affected by the impact of lockdown and who are ineligible for that first scheme. So basically reopening the discretionary scheme with that further funding. Obviously, coming out of the pandemic, it's important that we get our high street safely open, and we're doing that by supporting our town councils and parish councils in delivering a high street safety fund, which our officers have been supporting, and that's been facilitated through our Vital and Viable programme. And a package of banners, floor vinyl posters, feather flags and shop window vinyls will be available for market towns to reinforce social distancing and a shop local, stay safe message. I know that Woodall Spa has been engaged in that process, and it's being well received. So I'm pleased to see that going forward. The Vital and Viable programme, obviously affected by lockdown, but it has been recognised as a good piece of work as a national exemplar. And we were able to present to a High Street Task Force event, which had registered 900 attendees, which was very good. The Towns Fund, the Economic Development Team, were invited to present at the Westminster Social Policy Forum in June about the Towns Fund for Mablethorpe and Skegness, particularly in the development of the campus of future living. We were pleased to report that it was well received, and particularly positive response by the Chair, Lord Basson of Brighton. And Lord Basson was the lead on the House of Lords Select Committee that visited our coastal communities a couple of years ago, and it's pleased to see his interest still there in all that we're doing. Government financial support, it is as it says there, just an update. We've received in that £500 million tranche based on population and deprivation, we received just over £300,000. I think it was about £310,000, but happy to confirm that later. And also there is a compensation element, which we haven't yet received the full details on, and that amount is yet to be clarified. Obviously, our Wellbeing Link service has been very busy through the pandemic, dealing with supporting our most vulnerable residents. And we've had over 5,500 people access that support. And we are working with partners to understand what is needed by our communities as we move into recovery. And I have nothing but praise for our wellbeing teams and their partnership working, and it's been recognised by a feature in the County News magazine, which I'm very pleased to see. And of course, that service continues to be supported by an incredible network of volunteers and community groups across Lincolnshire. And I know that you all have taken your part in those volunteer groups supporting your local communities. So again, appreciation for your hard work, and of course to the officers involved. And that's across not just East Lindsey, but across the whole of the county. A Reserve Members' Day briefing session will be held on the 9th of September. Officers and key partners will provide an overview of the work that has been done to date to support businesses and communities throughout the pandemic, and as well as setting out what support will be in place as we move into the next phase of this work. And as a local business owner dealing with the pandemic and the impacts of that, I'm very pleased to see the support out there for businesses. Age-friendly futures, TED and East Lindsey, our partners in the TED programme, continue to deliver a fantastic service to our older and isolated residents across East Lindsey. And like many organisations, they have adapted their service delivery model and are focused on how they can make a longer term difference. And as we look to the future, we are proud to support the TED team as they deliver a new 12-month LEP-funded pilot project, Age-friendly futures, which is set to start in July 2020 and will be focused on supporting people over the age of 50. So we're all in luck, folks. Most of us, sorry. But it's very important work going forward. And I think we should be very grateful that we have so many good groups in our communities delivering support for our most vulnerable residents. Mr. Chairman, obviously, you'll have received my communication on local government review. And that is something that we're all very concerned about. The Executive Board and have had obviously quite a few discussions about this, and our intent is that we maintain an input into that. If we're not at the table, we won't be able to shape what goes forward. I think the key thing for East Lindsey is making sure that we have democratic accountability for our residents and access. This is all about scale and understanding how that will impact on our residents. And of course, we do have to give a great deal of thought to our officer corps, who have done a fantastic job over the last few months, but also have delivered for this authority over many years, and certainly this administration. And we've set some quite interesting and difficult challenges to overcome, but the staff and officers have always delivered for us. So I'm very mindful of the uncertainty that this puts out over our workforce. It is interesting that the timescales are so quick. We have written to the Secretary of State, the Minister, Simon Clarke, to ask that this process takes a little bit longer so that we are actually delivering the outcome in 2023 rather than 2022, which we think is too soon. And given that submission is September time, while we'll be working for that submission, I think the timescales in relation to providing a quality input are too fast. That's where we are, Mr. Chairman. I'm quite happy to give updates to our group leaders, which I will do regularly as more information comes forward. I will be discussing this obviously with our district colleagues to formulate proposals to go to that submission. And I will be making those known via the group leaders and also via direct briefings with the full council when those are appropriate and ready to go. So you know what I know, and an incredibly challenging time for local government, and something that I do believe we should be engaged in, even though we've started this as reluctant partners, given that we didn't set this agenda. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Leyland. Councillor Ros Jackson, please.
Thank you, Councillor Leyland. I think this report shows an absolute credit to the staff for the support that they give to residents and to local businesses, and also how multifaceted that support is. It really emphasises how important the council work is to our communities at this time. I mean, I noticed you didn't mention devolution in the report itself, but just verbally, because it's such a moving thing. So one of my asks is just to keep us updated, but also to involve the whole of the council and the backbenchers in how you shape that response to central government. You mention interesting timescales. I don't think these timescales are so much interesting as pure disaster capitalism, and an attempt to really rip down the really important structures of local government by central government at a time when we could use it least. So how do you respond to that?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Makinson-Sanders, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Leader. It's interesting. I know how very demanding the delivery of grants has been. My son's been heavily involved, and I can testify how very, very hard all the staff have worked over and above what was expected. So well done to that team, even though I had to declare an interest. And I hope you're going to be successful in channeling more money into supporting our struggling local businesses, because I know again from experience from people who have contacted me, there have been people who have had genuine reasons who want to appeal, and their appeals have been turned down. And I hope we'll be able to find some more money and look at their very genuine cases again. Just as a bit of an advert, I learnt yesterday that the More European, and I'm going to be wearing my hat as chairman of the Lindsay Action Zone, there is going to be another nearly £450,000 in European funding up for grabs. It's a very quick turnaround. If anybody wants any more information, get in touch with me, but it is a quick turnaround. But there is money, and it's usually for equipment and stuff. Safer high streets, I haven't actually seen any costed action plans, and I am heavily involved in Louth. But I do have concerns about Vital and Viable. I personally don't think it's working, but I am putting this down to the pandemic. Outdoor cafe seating is great, and I hope Councillor Leyland will be able to arrange the weather to make it a success. I'm not sure that's in his gift quite yet, but who knows. I haven't personally seen anything about a food project in Louth, and given it's always been my baby here, that's extremely strange. So I hope you'll be able to come back to me with an answer on why I haven't learned anything. And I'm sorry to have to report that one of our very best shops, a local butcher who is a BBC Young Butcher of the Year, has ceased trading on in the main street. He's now gone online, and I think that is a huge, huge loss to our food offer in Louth. And I would like the council to try and persuade him. Otherwise, I'm trying, but more of us might get a bit better. On the Towns Fund, it's great to hear how well it's going, and that Westminster's engaged. And I'm going to ask you if you can give us the information that the Westminster's had, because members of my group are keen to know what the projects are. Wellbeing, and it's a big thank you and a genuine heartfelt thank you to all the team for supporting our vulnerable residents so well, and their kindness has really touched so many hearts, so big thank you. The TED programme, I'm publicising that to people, but I know lots of people, but I do wish you'd said at the end of your last sentence, East Lindsey can be an area where people can continue to live and age well, because we should be counting our blessings here. We've got an awful lot to be grateful for. Local government review, I'm fully in support of you, and I'm going to write to the Minister. I've started my letter, but I keep changing it. So you'd be glad to know that you're getting support from the independent group. And I just finally want to say a big thank you to all our staff for their dedication to public service during these strange times. They really, poor things, have been through the mill with so much uncertainty, from Horncastle to the merger with Boston and to this unitary status. And so it is a big thank you from for independent councillors. We really do appreciate everything you do for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howard, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to say that I want to be linked with the comments of the last two speakers, thanking our officers and workforce for the absolutely splendid way that over the past 10-12 weeks they've adapted to the new circumstances and just done everything within their remit to ensure that our local people are looked after in these trying times. I really do sincerely want to thank them all, those that are in their normal positions, and especially those that have been redeployed into areas where they would never have thought to tread previously. Which then disappoints me that I've got to go on to talk about this surprise package of local government reorganisation. The last time we went down this path was back in the early 70s, and it took some years. So I'm told. I wasn't actually around then, and I believe Councillor Leyland, you may not have been around at that time as well. You might want to confirm that for me. but it was the Local Government Act of 1972, which saw it enacted in 1974. So the actual enactment was an 18-month to 2-year process, and yet we're supposed to have proposals on the table by this September from a standing start. Undue haste, and when you do things in haste, I'm sure you'll agree with me, you repent at leisure. So I do hope that you're successful in your petitions with the other district leaders to get a proper time scale put onto this project. At the last meeting, we took the step of moving towards the alliance with Boston. Now, this, to me, was a first step towards a devolution settlement, towards a reorganisation of local government. And again, it's being spread over 18 months to 2 years, a steady process, step by step, plenty of scrutiny on the way, a planned approach, not a headlong rush, but I also thought it was that vital first step towards devolution from the ground up, as opposed to being imposed by national government with the puppets at the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Mossop, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. It's more of the same, really. So I'll keep it very brief. You know, I'm in support of your stance on the devolution issue, and I really do hope that we can have a longer discussion at some stage, probably through a members' day, to just beat out some of tease out some of the issues, bearing in mind that we could be on a potential collision course with the county council on this. And so my question really is, how does this sit with county and your county colleagues? I hope they're in support of you in the stance that you've taken here at district, those ones that are represented on both councils, because we are a representative democracy. We are closer to the people here, and whilst unitary could well be on the cards for us as a district, I haven't really enjoyed, and I've endured the two-tier system as we all have, and found the frustrations of it. I think we could take on more responsibilities at a local level, and still retain the closeness to our residents. And just one other point was about leader funding. That also, that Councillor Makinson-Saunders mentioned, the coastal action zone is also open for some more bids and applications as well. It's a very short window, but there is an underspend. It seems that we can do something at least before the end of the year, but in terms of granting to businesses along the coastal strip as well as up on the Wold. So please, if you know of anyone, we'll try and circulate the information to as many of you as possible to encourage people to apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mossop. Councillor Marsh, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to pass on the thanks from the Mayor of Alford. They had their first face-to-face meeting last night, and part of the mop-up, the speech by the new chairman, was the thanks and support that East Lindsey officers have given to local businesses by the very swift way that they allocated the money out for people that were entitled to it on the rate relief. And a really big thank you to the refuse collectors who, day after day, week after week, there was no noticeable change. Everything worked as it worked prior to COVID, and they just wanted the thanks of all the people of Alford and the surrounding area and the councillors to be made to all the staff. And I thought the most appropriate way was to announce it while anybody that's watching will see, but the rest of the councillors will also see it. I'm sure that most of us, when we start picking up our parish and town councils again, will get similar messages of thanks to bring back to the council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Leyland, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for those comments. Just going through them, and I dare say that many of you will probably share the same views. Councillor Jackson, I'm using a little bit of understatement, because if I was to use the language that I would need to use to express my deep concern about the timescales, it probably wouldn't be publishable or printable. But you do make a fair point. It is actually very important that we make sure that the timescales are more sensible. And I'm quite happy to commit that I will keep this whole council updated as these matters progress. And once we have some more information, I will gladly come back to full council via a direct members day to discuss this. I am very concerned, given, and while we all speak with different hats on here in terms of opposition and administration, this council's done much great work over the last few years, with support from all opposition groups in the main, which I'm very pleased to acknowledge. And so how we handle this for our residents and our officers, and how we shape this, is going to be critically important. So Councillor Jackson, you do have my assurance that we will make sure all councillors are involved in this process once we have something to bring forward. Councillor Matheson-Sanders, you went through quite a list of things, and can I just share your appreciation of all the work that's been done by our officers, and thank you for your good words. I did write a direct communication to officers when the reorganisation, local government reorganisation communication went out. So I've got a RAF jet flying past. It's very kind of them. They must know our meeting's on. So yes, your points are well made. Thank you for the information about the LAS. In respect of the vital and viable, I know from our group leaders meeting that Tim Leader gave an undertaking to give you a full update on all the work that's been going on. I'll make sure that happens. And also I will quite happily make sure that the presentation that was made regarding the town fund is shared, because that would be very helpful. In respect of wellbeing, yes, fully appreciative of your comments for the wellbeing teams and the economic development teams working very hard. I'm quite happy to echo that as well. And in relation to Ted, and you're right, we do live in a great county and a district, and the opportunities for ageing well are very wide and very good. So we are lucky to have so many groups supporting that. And of course, it's quite a theme of this council's work that we support that better ageing process as we all enter those years where we look to have a good quality of life. So thank you for your comments. In respect of local government reorganisation, I appreciate your support, and again acknowledge your concerns for how this affects our staff. Councillor Howard, again, thank you for your comments regarding staff. I'm quite happy to pass those on, and obviously we'll do that through the minutes of this meeting. Your points that you make about LGR, and was I about in the mid-70s? I was, but I was in Zambia enjoying being a 12-year-old. You make a very good point about the timescales of that initial process, the 70s reorganisation. It did take a long time, and the reality is that they probably didn't get it all right then. So to rush into it now does seem a bit of a folly. And I do take your points about the alliance with Boston. That is putting a footprint in the sand in terms of an example of how we can reduce costs in running authorities by sharing management structures. But the approach is considered over an 18-month to 2-year process with real scrutiny involved. So thank you for those observations. And we will again endeavour to make sure that you're fully informed as the LGR process happens. Councillor Mossop, again, thank you for your comments. Quite happy to acknowledge, again, as I said to Councillor Jackson, that we would have a reserved members' day to discuss this fully. Obviously, the fact that we have a verbal report tonight is, my time hasn't been my own this last few weeks since this has all erupted, and working very hard with our district colleagues to formulate plans going forward and ready for a submission. But all the options and possibilities will be laid out to members, and it's quite proper and likely, well, it's quite likely and proper that we have a vote at full council about which way this council wants to progress in terms of those potential structures. But we do need to have some ideas of what those are, and this succeeds only with the appropriate evidence, and we need to make sure that we have that appropriate evidence. So that there is a little bit of work to do, but again, happy to share fully with this council that work. And again, thank you for the information about the Coastal Action Zone. It might be appropriate if you and Councillor Maxton Sanders want to make those that information known to our comms team. I'm sure they'll be happy to make that known via their various portals to the wider public. So I'm just breathing now. Councillor Marsh, thank you for your comments from the Mayor of Alford. It's always good to receive thanks from our communities. I certainly know from my own local community the appreciation for all the work that's been done. And it's very true, actually, that many invisible people have become visible during this COVID pandemic, in terms of how important they are, but have been working in the background, probably not acknowledged to the extent they should have been. And certainly our waste teams have been an example of that, and I think they've done a fantastic job. They've even had a following in terms of the new lorries coming out, and the wave at the vans as they go past. So very pleased to acknowledge that, and thank you for your acknowledgement of the work of our officers and refuse teams. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that concludes all the questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leyland. Right, item 8 on the agenda, financial performance 2019-20, medium revenue provision, voluntary revenue provision, to consider a recommendation from the Exec Board. Councillor Fry, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Councillors, when this council approved the decision to invest in commercial property bonds, it was clear that this was a long-term investment over 50 years, and that there would be fluctuations in both capital and revenue returns throughout their lifespan. The value of the investments are reported to me through finance portfolio meetings on a monthly basis, and are also monitored by Audit and Governance Committee. The underlying principle around the minimum revenue provision is essentially the same thing that each of us would personally do, in so much as the authority must make provision each year to pay off the capital value of any debt. In this case, in the case of this council, we must provide cover for and reduce over time the capital financing requirement liability of the council. We have a positive capital finance liability, and therefore there is a need for a minimum revenue provision which cannot be nil. When we purchased our property fund holdings, we also transferred a sum of £1 million, the general fund reserve, to cover any future MRP or VRP, that's the voluntary revenue provision contribution, which might be necessary. This £1 million reserve was subsequently transferred into an investment volatility earmarked reserve on the advice of external auditors to ensure it was solely for this purpose. At the end of 2019-20, due to the negative financial impacts of COVID-19, the capital value of the council's property funds was reduced to a degree where it was prudent to make an MRP and indeed a VRP charge to the council's revenue account. We also know that due to the long-term nature of these investments, the value will return to and exceed the pre-COVID-19 level. Therefore, both a small MRP and a much more substantial VRP charge has been deemed appropriate by our Section 1151 officer. With a VRP charge, when capital value returns to more expected levels, Council has the option that this can be reversed and the monies used to fund it returned to the reserve that it came from. So, in order to comply with the minimum revenue provision, a charge of £2 will be levied, and with the voluntary revenue provision, given that it can be returned to whence it came, a charge of £1,428,623 will be made in terms of the 2019-20 accounts. It is recommended that we use the investment volatility reserve and a component of the business rates volatility reserve to temporarily fund this charge. Please note that, as previously stated, when property fund values return to their expected levels, this charge can be reversed and the monies returned to these reserves. So, formally and in summary, at its meeting on the 8th of July 2020, Executive Board noted that the Council revenue account overspend of £199,616 for the 2019-20, and also noted and recommended the Council to approve the use of reserves to fund a voluntary revenue provision. This report sets out the two reserve movements which will require approval to fund a minimum revenue provision and a voluntary revenue provision contribution to the Council is required to make to its 2019-20 accounts to recognise the reductions in value of its property fund holdings at the 31st of March 2020. So the recommendation is that Council approves the use of £1 million from the Investments Volatility Reserve and £428,625 from the Business Rates Volatility Reserve to fund a minimum revenue provision and a voluntary revenue provision in 2019-20. And the reason for this is the Council approved the minimum revenue provision policy statement applicable to 2019-20 at its meeting on the 6th of March 2019. The voluntary revenue provision contribution is also in line with this policy. Chairman, I therefore propose these recommendations for approval by this Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. Have we a seconder for that recommendation, please?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Happy to second and reserve my right to speak, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Councillor Jackson, please.
Thank you. I'd like to back this. Since the property funds were bought, they've lost £2 million in capital value. Now that's not necessarily a crisis as long as we handle it properly. And so I believe that we do need to make this provision. It's the prudent thing to do, and I think it's something that this Council should back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Makinson-Sanders, please.
Well, I'd back it as well. I was just fascinated to know why the MRP was £2. I wondered what, it seemed like a random number to me, but perhaps you'll explain it. I just think you need a degree in economics almost to understand this paper, but I just wondered how you settled on the £2, but I think it's sensible, and I can understand where you're coming from. Just even now returning to audit, it's really looking at council finances is really fascinating anyway. So it's a complicated thing, and Mr. Sibley, I take my hat off to you and to Mr. Fry, because it's jolly hard work with all those different columns. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Danny Brooks, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. £2 million loss. All I can say is I'm glad I didn't vote for it. And you think they're going to be coming back soon. You know, I just think we're chucking good money after bad. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. That's all. No more questions. Right, Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question, really. Do we have a figure when what we are going to basically fold a hand, basically? Or do we just keep going and chucking good money after bad? Because I always believe it's never good to chase your losses. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leonard, please.
Thank you. Unless I've misunderstood it, could I just confirm that the fact that the figures were for 19/20 financial period, and obviously given the repercussions from COVID going forward into 2021 and onwards, obviously the country's not going to recover overnight. So the question will be similar to that that's just been asked: at what point do we fold our cards and say, if there is a loss in 2021 and then 21/22, at what point are we actually going to look at it and do something about it? Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Leyland, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I will leave the technical answers to my colleague, Councillor Fry, and just congratulate him on his management of this. It is not without challenge, but I think he and his team have a good understanding and view to how this is managed for the future. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Leyland. Councillor Fry, please.
Thank you very much again, Chairman. Well, thank you all for your comments. Councillor Jackson, thank you for backing the provision. It is a sensible and prudent thing to do. And Councillor Makinson-Sanders, yes, again, thank you for your support. The NRT at £2 is essentially random, really. It's about minimising the amount of money that we can't get back. The voluntary revenue provision allows us to return the money when we recover the capital value of these bonds, which they certainly will do. Unfortunately, Councillor Danny Brooks was entirely inaudible, but I suspect his comment was very similar to Councillor Jimmy Brooks about not chasing losses. And I think that's extremely unlikely. The way these funds work is the reason that they are the way they are is because there is the funds have closed their doors for the moment. And that's to our protection, because if a whole load of capital assets were sold off, then the value of these funds would crash. And so the funds close, and they don't allow huge, but selling a large piece of real estate is not easy. So quite clearly, they need to protect us from people who might want to do that. And I'm really pleased that they do. And the fact of the matter is that when such movements, such sales are not going on, then there is no basis on which they have what are called independent pricing subcommittees, and there is no evidence on which they can do their work. So at the moment, I think the capital value of our bonds are entirely artificial, and that in fact they'll come back very quickly after the COVID pandemic crisis is over. It is also, however, the case that I am always concerned but not worried, and the concern is around the fact that we know that a lot of companies are taking a lot of knocks, and these are the very companies that lease the properties that provide us with their revenue returns. And so therefore, I have an expectation that these things will take a bit of time to recover, but they will recover and we won't be chasing any losses. And I think the same comment really honestly goes for Councillor Leonard's query regarding chasing losses. We won't be doing that. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you, Councillor Fry. Okay, so we will go to the votes. And
thank you, Chairman. Councillor Terry Aldridge. Councillor Aldridge.
Didn't realise we were having a recorded vote. But yes.
Thank you.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor David Andrews.
4.
Councillor Tom Ashton.
4.
Councillor Richard Avison.
4.
Councillor Stan Avison.
4.
Councillor Adrian Benjamin.
4.
Councillor Wendy Bowkett.
4.
Councillor Billy Brooks.
4.
Councillor Danny Brooks.
4.
Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Good luck. 4.
Councillor Trevor Burnham.
4.
Councillor Sandra Campbell-Wardman.
4.
Councillor Graham Cullen.
4.
Councillor Richard Cunnington.
4.
Councillor Mark Dammett.
4.
Councillor Colin Davey.
4.
Councillor Sid Dennis.
4.
Councillor Sarah Devereux,
4.
Councillor Colin Dickinson,
4.
Councillor Edgington is absent, I believe. Councillor Stephen Eyre,
Against.
Councillor Martin Foster,
4.
Councillor Richard Fry,
4,
Councillor William Gray,
4.
Councillor Chris Green,
4.
Councillor Adam Grist,
4.
Councillor Will Grover,
4.
Councillor Alex Hall,
4.
Councillor David Hall,
4.
Councillor Sandra Harrison,
4.
Councillor Paul Hibbert Greaves,
4.
Councillor George Horton,
4.
Councillor Tony Howard,
4.
Councillor Ross Jackson,
4.
Councillor Neil Jones,
4.
Councillor Thomas Kemp,
4.
Councillor Steve Kirk,
4.
Councillor Terry Knowles,
Against.
Councillor Andrew Leonard,
Against.
Councillor Craig Leyland,
4.
Councillor Jill Makinson Sanders, Councillor Makinson Sanders.
Sorry, I thought I said so. 4. Yes,
Thank
sorry.
you, thank you. Councillor David Manjon,
4.
Councillor Graham Marsh,
4.
Councillor Fiona Martin,
4.
Councillor Helen Matthews,
4.
Councillor Steve McMillan. Councillor
Not
McMillan
here.
is absent, sorry. Councillor Daniel McNally,
4.
Councillor Edward Mossop,
4.
Councillor Claire Newman,
4.
Councillor Sarah Parkin is an apology. Councillor Julie Platt,
4.
Councillor Paul Rickett,
4.
Councillor Phil Smith,
4.
Councillor Jim Swanson,
Against.
Councillor Turton Levers is an apology. Thank you. Just one moment, please. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. That's carried 47 for, 4 against and 4 absent.
Thank you very much, Anne. Okay, so that's carried. Item 10 on the agenda is a carbon reduction target to consider a recommendation from the Exec Board. Councillor Marsh, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The report before Council today is the culmination of a piece of work that the Council started some time ago. And on the 6th of March 2019, the Council agreed its first carbon management plan. Since then, there's lots been happening, but not a lot's been coordinated and added together. And the Council now has appointed Sarah Baker as the carbon reduction, let me just get a title right, the Climate Change and Environmental Officer. And she, in fairness, has driven a lot of this work forward. We've been working in partnership with the Carbon Trust, who have carried out an examination of the council to determine what its carbon footprint is. And they've agreed to work with the council ongoing to bring forward a raft of various things which the council will be looking at to implement or not to bring their carbon footprint down. Now, the government has said that all councils and other organisations should look to become carbon neutral by 2050. working with the scrutiny group and Sarah, we're bringing forward this proposal that East Lindsey will actually look to have carbon neutral emissions by 2040. And the reason that we've come forward 10 years is because we think it's achievable, but those last 5% are very difficult to achieve for all sorts of reasons. So it's giving the councillors and the council at that time, if we're still in existence, 10 years to really screw that last small percentage down, which is the hardest. We've also would like to bring in a carbon reduction target of 45% by 2017, and this will be reviewed at what did I say, 2027, sorry. But we've also brought in a review at 2023, so that the work that's being carried out to reach these reductions can be scrutinised and can be brought before the council rather, just to show that we're on target. The targets are stretching, but I believe that they are achievable. And I think you notice, if you see any papers coming out now, that carbon management and carbon issues are one of the compulsory sections that people have got to consider when they put papers forward. So I think this is ambitious. I think it's far better to go with this than declare a climate emergency, which a lot of people are doing, but they declare a carbon emergency, they put it on the shelf and it gathers dust. Here, we're actually going to do something. And I think it's something that all sides, all politicians, all groups can sign up to, because it's the right thing to do for not only our futures, but for our children, our children's children. So with that, the recommendation is that the council commits to reduce its carbon emission to net zero by 2040, with a minimum emission of 45% by 2027, ensuring it leads by example and encouraging the district as a whole to undertake similar steps, and also commits to review of those targets in 2023 to ensure they are on track, and agrees that this commitment should be supported by an ongoing process of annual reporting and scrutiny. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Councillor Mark. Have we a seconder for that recommendation, please?
I'm happy to second it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grover, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few words. I don't know if anyone else is going to speak, but I hope that everyone really gets behind this. And I know that some people may be critical of the target and say we should be moving faster, both as a district and as a country. But you know, we've got to start somewhere, and we do face a problem as a globe in cutting carbon and going green. But I just wanted to highlight some of the work that has already been done. And I just did a quick Google and just a few statistics just to show how far the UK as a country has already come. To point out that since 1990, 38% CO2 emissions have fallen 38% since 1990. And the other thing I wanted to just point out as well, in the first quarter of 2020, renewable energy made up 47% of UK energy output. We still have a long way to go, but I think this is a damn good start, and I'm fully behind it.
Thank you, Councillor Grover. Councillor Phil Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm very supportive of this this report and its contents. It's very sad that we are in the position that we currently are, because we really are in the grips of a carbon emergency. And what is important is that we do something radical and achievable. And we need to be thinking about how realistic we are, not in terms of how much it will cost us or how difficult the job will be, but in terms of how we can realistically reach those goals that Graham mentioned just a moment ago. To be frank, the sorts of the sorts of reductions we're planning to make by 2027, we should have made by 2017. They should have been our goals. If we were going to reach the parts per million targets that were set out in the Paris agreements and so on, we should have hit that 18 months ago, because we're now at that point that guarantees 2 degrees and so on. So I think that's really important, and it's really important that we consider these things in every decision that we make as a council, in every contract we enter into, and in every everything we procure and every piece of work that we do, because it is only through reducing our carbon, not really through offsetting, that we can and doing that as quickly as possible in every possible instance, that we can really survive, not just as a race, but as a council. That we've got the inevitability of carbon taxes coming in, and the sooner we offset, the sooner we reduce, the less that millstone is going to be around our neck, as well as the planetary gains we get from the cumulative carbon that we save by doing these things early. I would like to, it does worry me that in the last 10 years, carbon has not been on our agenda at all, and that this will require a massive cultural change from the council. It's a cultural change which I think that from the very top of this council, our officers and our executive are behind, and I'm really heartened by that. I'm really heartened by the way that the Councillor Marsh has engaged with this. I'm very heartened by the words of Councillor Leyland, both in his speech, his opening speech last year, and in his actions this year. Throughout the council, our culture is more difficult to address. We are at the moment tendering for our fleet maintenance contract. I discovered in a scrutiny meeting yesterday. And this will be a maintenance contract for a diesel fleet for the next 6 years, with barely a mention of the possibility that we may go electric, which just lays us in for greater costs when we do go electric. We need to be putting these things into our tendering processes now. We need to be thinking about them when we contract now, or we are lining ourselves up for making that process of becoming carbon neutral, of going to electric vehicles, all of these things, which are basically the low-hanging fruit of our carbon management. We need to be thinking about those now, and we should have been thinking about them 3, 4, 5 years ago, and getting that culture state. It's going to be a radical thing, and this is where it starts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Makinson-Sanders, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm going to disagree completely with Councillor Smith. Whilst I'm fully supportive of going green, I don't think electric cars are the way forward. They rely very heavy on heavy metals that are mined in the Congo under terrible conditions and so forth. So the energy going into making electric cars is awful. So I don't know how you're jumping on the bandwagon with just saying electric. I think actually hydrogen would be a much better way forward. I've been talking with the former councillor Daniel Simpson a lot recently, talking about vehicles, and he assures me that the latest range of diesels are the most efficient and effective and the least polluting of the lot. And he's got a lot of experience of electric vehicles as well, which he thinks are not good anyway. I won't use the other term. And I would question this, saying the furthest the light fleet would go is a typical daily mileage of 191 miles. Very, very few electric vehicles are capable of doing that. And I read practically everything there is going about electric vehicles, I think. But I wanted to also highlight my passion to see this incorporated into our planning policies. And I think that's a really important step that people can get engaged with as well. I'd like, every housing estate to be lined with trees. I'd like every home to have a garden so people can grow some of their own stuff and be outside and enjoy the environment as well. There are lots of other other things we can do. And this is just concentrating really on transport and heating up our buildings. And I think that's I think that's a shame really, because I would have liked to have seen, I think planning is just so important. Trees, the government's target for trees is never going to be hit because we're not producing enough trees to be able to plant them out. But we'll all do our bit for all of those. So it's not just about cars and vehicles. I have to say, I think a lot of it you can tell is written by the Carbon Trust, because it's bleating on yet again about public transport, which we know we don't have much of, but perhaps we can all get a horse or something, but then I expect the emissions from the horses would be wrong too. But it's a good start. Let's, I don't agree about electric vehicles, but let's keep moving forward for my grandchildren and their children as well. So I'm on board with it all. I just would do it slightly differently.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ashton, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I genuinely applaud the recommendations that we have this evening. I believe it strikes exactly the right balance and demonstrates both strong leadership and doing the right thing, but also balancing that against the cost of potentially pursuing even more ambitious arbitrary targets. I'm pleased to see that this is a well thought out, achievable set of targets that, as I say, strike the right balance between doing the right thing and the impact on the services which the people that we're here to serve rely upon. And I was in conversation earlier today with a director of the Environment Agency making exactly this point, that no one out there that relies on our services would thank us for hamstringing those services simply to achieve a target that wouldn't otherwise be reasonable. And I genuinely agree with the point that Councillor Makerson-Sanders has made in respect of electric vehicle propulsion. Some of this stuff is, technology is moving so fast that it is right and proper that we do take it sensibly. We've just invested in a fleet of new freighters for emptying resident bins. They are going to require a servicing contract because they are diesel vehicles. There's no point having a servicing contract for electric vehicles if we've got diesel vehicles with a 6 or 7 year service life. In 6 or 7 years time, we may well have technology which allows us to look at the options, but at the same time, I think the framework and plan that we have before us this evening allows us to, as I say, to do those right things without doing them in a way that harms the services that we are expected to deliver, or burden ourselves with additional costs that would ultimately have to be passed on to our residents and taxpayers. Additionally, I would just pick up on, again, I couldn't speak without picking up Councillor Makerson-Sanders' views in respect of planning, and I'm sure we will see this environmentally conscious theme running through an awful lot of what we do as a council. Personally, I am genuinely excited at the prospect of environmental net gain, particularly in respect of planning. Anything that allows us to deliver nicer developments with greater, with lower densities and increased green space and trees. If the legislation that the government is due to pass imminently will allow us to do that, I will cheer to the rafters. At the same time, I would urge a note of caution in that optimism, and we will of course have to wait to see what powers and what ability, what we have to do. But I am sure with the attitude that we see coming through, which the council is showing and leading on, then I'm more than happy to sustain that and echo that wherever possible through planning.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillor Leyland, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased someone's remembered my speech of 2019. Thank you, Councillor Smith, for remembering that. And when I wrote it and presented it to the council, it was seemingly at that point in time a very daunting proposition of what we should achieve and have ambition for. And I'm very pleased to say that we have taken this forward. I think the work that Sarah Baker is going to be doing with us and through the scrutiny process will deliver for this council. And of course, it is much wider than what this council does. And I think that's a point well made. It's about our environment, about how we green the environment and how we make that environment sustainable for the future. So I'm very pleased to support this paper. I'm very pleased to see it here this evening, and very pleased to hear the supportive comments in general that have been made thus far. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leyland. Councillor Howard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanting to say that I welcome the way that the recommendation was worded to link the targets to the spans of each council with deadlines at 2023 and 2027. Of course, that has all been thrown up in the air by the possibility of local government reorganisation altering those dates. But I hope that we do stick to reviewing these things in the cycle of whatever council exists to take this forward. Going back to what Councillor Smith was saying about the writing of contracts for the vehicles, I don't think the point is the one that Councillor Makinson-Sanders was trying to make about whether it's electric vehicles that replace our current fleet of vehicles or whatever type it is. But the point was that the contract is being written with a presumption in old money, if you wish. It's a presumption that it will be a normal everyday vehicle, either petrol or diesel, being maintained in the long term. And this is not a one-year contract. This is a long-term contract that we're going to fit ourselves into and hamstring ourselves to take advantage of whatever vehicles come along that are improved. 6 years is a very long time, and this is something that is gathering momentum, and there may be the possibility to move over maybe our pool cars or some of our smaller vehicles that are used, the sort of transit wheelbase type vehicles that we use. But we seem to be writing the contract purely from the point of view of the large fleet vehicles. So I wonder, we've got a new appointment in place, but I wonder what input there has been from Sarah Baker, our new officer. And I think that I would urge the portfolio holder on that particular contract to just stop it in its tracks, and maybe for the sake of publishing it a week late, get somebody to review the writing of that contract, because we don't seem to be working as a unit here. We've got these recommendations for carbon emission reductions, and yet we're writing an old style maintenance contract. So I would urge the portfolio holder to intervene on that particular one, and just for the sake of a few days, let's just look at the writing of that contract and get it into a perspective of not what we want tomorrow, but what we want over a 6-year possible transitional type of term to a different set of vehicles in 6 years' time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Mannion. Councillor Mannion?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I can't allow you to speak. You didn't reserve your right to speak. So I'm sorry. So I'll move on to Councillor Marsh, please.
Thank you very much. Some interesting comments. I'm pleased to see that, or I hope that the recommendations will be supported. One or two little bits. I'm not going to go through what everybody says because we've all heard it, but thank you for your comments. Phil is certainly going to be a man with a passion leading this scrutiny of this, and I'm sure that he will ensure that we consider sensibly things that may have a positive effect. I hate to say it, Phil, but we, at some stage through the consideration, we will have to consider the cost, because that's just a thing that we've got to do as well as. But cost won't be the leading factor. For the ones that mentioned about the building and the rest of it, I, for a long time, have been a huge advocate that we should have a bigger control over how houses or how buildings are built, rather than just giving permission for them to be put up and monitoring the safe way that they are built. I personally, for one, would insist that all houses have got all light switches and plugs at a height that's accessible for disabled people in a wheelchair, and stops children sticking their fingers in it when they're small. Doors should be wide enough for a wheelchair as an absolute, without having to alter things. All sorts of things that we could do, but those cost money, and I'm afraid it's about they build them as cheap as they can to get as much profit as they can, and it's not always good. Green spaces, gardens and trees around housing estates, I would like to say yes, but being a cynic, I've been around some of the housing estates, and I think that some of the people must use a knife and fork to garden with, because I'm a keen gardener and I've seen some estates out there. What I would like to see is some money on the edge of building big planning things, are some allotments or half allotments, because the then keen gardeners can grow what they want to grow and make their allotments the focal point. Really good for people, for well-being issues, to garden with other people, and that's how young people, that's how I got into a lot of the things I do in gardening, was by when I left the army, I joined the Allotment Association at Gainsborough. Great group of people there, both men and women, who taught me an awful lot. So that's something I think we should look at and try to push. I know it's not our responsibility, it's town councils and parish councils, but if we've got some land that's available that could be used, we should be maybe thinking that. Don't forget Sarah's scheme about community orchards or school orchards. I'm a great believer in not planting a tree to plant a tree, but let's plant things that not only do the environment good, but could increase our health. If we start planting orchards, the young people can learn how to grow their apple tree, pick their apples, and it's always more exciting to pick your apples and eat your own apples than it is to go down to the greengrocers and get one. So there's lots we can do there. I'm a little bit at sea over the contract. I thought the contract for the vehicles was primarily tied into the heavy goods vehicles, and that's a new fleet, and I can see the sense in going for a longer contract because we'll get a better deal at that. But also, we've just replaced them. We're going to keep them for their life unless something comes along which is hugely beneficial that we can afford to change. So we need to look at that possibly, but like I say, thank you all for your comments. It's good to have views from opposing views, because it makes you question your original views, and I look forward to working with Sarah and the scrutiny panel and doing the annual review, because I'm sure that Phil will hold me to account quite severely if we don't do what we're supposed to be doing. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Right, we go to the vote then. Anne, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Aldridge.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I agree, approve. I look forward to being around in 2040 to make sure we've achieved it.
Councillor Andrews.
4.
Councillor Ashton.
4.
Councillor Richard Avison.
4.
Councillor Stan Avison.
4.
Councillor Adrian Benjamin.
4.
Councillor Wendy Bowkett.
4.
Councillor Billy Brooks.
4.
Councillor Danny Brooks.
I believe he's struggling to get connected at the minute.
Thank you. Councillor Danny Brooks is absent at the moment. Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Unfortunately, I had a power cut halfway through the agenda item, so I can't vote.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Trevor Burnham.
4.
Councillor Sandra Campbell-Wardman.
4.
Councillor Graham Cullen.
4.
Councillor Richard Cunnington.
Yeah, the same as Councillor Jimmy Brooks. I had a power cut halfway through and missed half the debate, so won't be able to vote.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Dannett.
4.
Councillor Colin Davey.
4.
Councillor Sid Dennis.
4.
Councillor Sarah Devereux.
4.
Councillor Colleen Dickinson.
4.
Councillor Edgington is an apology. Councillor Stephen Eyre.
4.
Councillor Martin Foster.
4.
Councillor Richard Fry.
4.
Councillor William Gray.
4.
Councillor Chris Green.
4.
Councillor Adam Grist.
Fully support, yep, 4.
Councillor Will Grover.
4.
Councillor Alex Hall.
4.
Councillor David Hall.
4.
Councillor Sandra Harrison.
4.
Councillor Paul Hibbett Greaves.
4.
Councillor George Horton.
4.
Councillor Tony Howard.
4.
Councillor Ros Jackson.
4.
Councillor Neil Jones.
4.
Councillor Thomas Kemp.
4.
Councillor Steve Kirk.
4.
Councillor Terry Knowles.
4.
Councillor Andrew Leonard.
4.
Councillor Craig Leyland.
4.
Councillor Jill Makinson Sanders.
4.
Councillor David Manjom.
4.
Councillor Graham Marsh.
4.
Councillor Fiona Martin. 4. Thank you. Councillor Helen Matthews.
4.
Councillor Steve McMillan is absent. Councillor Daniel McNally.
4.
Councillor Edward Mossop.
I have to leave this meeting in 5 minutes, but it's 4.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Councillor Claire Newman.
4.
Councillor Sarah Parkin is absent this evening. Councillor Julie Platt.
4.
Councillor Paul Rickett.
4.
Councillor Phil Smith.
4.
Councillor Jim Swanson.
4.
Councillor Mel Turton-Levers is absent this evening. Thank you. One moment, please, Chairman.
Okay.
Chairman, did you hear that Edward Mossop, I'm leaving the meeting now.
I did. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you, Chairman. That's carried 48 for 7 absent.
Okay, so that's carried. So we go to item 11, political proportionality. To consider the allocations of places on council committees in accordance with the political group regulations. Councillor Leyland, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The paper is very straightforward and before all councillors. I'll just go through it just for clarity. The allocation of council committee places must be made in accordance with the provisions of section 15 to 17 of the Local Government Act. And this report considers the allocations of places on council committees in accordance with the political group regulations. The Chief Executive received notification on the 17th of June 2020 that Councillor Sarah Parkin is no longer affiliated to any political group. Councillor Parkin was previously a member of the Labour group. In terms of committee places, Councillor Howard, as leader of the Labour group, has transferred the Labour group allocation on the overview committee to Councillor Parkin, and no further changes are required. So the recommendation to Council this evening is that the allocation of seats and total number of seats as detailed at Appendix A to the report be approved in accordance with sections 15 to 17 of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989 and the Local Government Committees and Political Groups Regulations 1990. And recommendation 2, that the group's appointments to the vacancies identified in the council meeting allocations document detailed as Appendix B be agreed. It's very straightforward, Mr. Chairman. It is what it is, and I'm happy to propose it.
Thank you, Councillor Leyland. Have we a seconder for that, please?
Yes, I'm quite happy to second that one. Thank you, Chairman.
Is that it? Okay, Councillor Alton, please.
Oh yeah, and reserve my right to speak, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. No, I do accept the report. I think that's quite right. And obviously it's legislation that we have to follow. But I don't like the idea that it was reviewed by a monitoring officer and signed off by the Assistant Director of Corporate Governance. I think there should be a name on that.
Is that it? You finished? Councillor Alton, you finished?
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we go to Councillor Marsh, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, like the leader said, it is what it is, and I have nothing further to say on this. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Leyland, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll quite happily provide Councillor Horton with a name. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we go to the vote. So Anne, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Terry Aldridge.
Agree.
Councillor David Andrews.
For.
Councillor Tom Ashton.
For.
Councillor Richard Avison.
For.
Councillor Stan Avison.
For.
Councillor Adrian Benjamin.
For.
Councillor Wendy Bowkett.
For.
Councillor Billy Brooks.
For.
Councillor Danny Brooks.
For.
Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
For.
Councillor Trevor Burnham.
For.
Councillor Campbell Wardman.
For.
Councillor Graham Cullen.
For.
Councillor Richard Cunnington.
For.
Councillor Mark Dannett.
For.
Councillor Colin Davey.
For.
Councillor Sid Dennis.
For.
Councillor Sarah Devereux.
For.
Councillor Colin Dickinson.
For.
Councillor Dick Edgington is absent. Councillor Stephen Eyre.
For.
Councillor Martin Foster.
For.
Councillor Richard Fry.
For.
Councillor William Gray.
For.
Councillor Chris Green.
For.
Councillor Adam Grist.
For.
Councillor Will Grover.
For.
Councillor Alex Hall.
For.
Councillor David Hall.
For.
Councillor Sandra Harrison. Councillor Harrison.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbert Greaves.
For.
Councillor George Houghton.
For.
Councillor Tony Howard.
For.
Councillor Ros Jackson.
For.
Councillor Neil Jones.
For, but couldn't we just ask if there's anybody against instead of going through all this tiresome thing?
Councillor Jones, the procedures require us to just take each vote in person in order. That's the procedure that's been agreed, I understand, by group leaders.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas Kemp.
For.
Councillor Steve Kirk.
For.
Councillor Terry Knowles.
For.
Councillor Andrew Leonard.
For.
Councillor Craig Leyland.
For.
Councillor Jill Makinson Sanders.
Well, just on a point of order, why can't Councillor Leyland answer Councillor Horton's question? He must know who the monitoring officer is and the Assistant Director of Corporate Governance. As a point of order, could he answer that?
Our monitoring officer is Michelle Sachs.
So she wrote the report. And the
I believe-
Assistant Director of Corporate Governance is.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
And who is the Assistant Director of Corporate Governance? I think Councillor Horton's question was a valid question. It needs to be answered.
Councillor Leyland, if I may assist, with your permission, when the report was written, John Armstrong was the monitoring officer because it was prepared a little while ago. So it actually is the monitoring officer, and then John Armstrong actually was the Assistant Director of Corporate Governance. It's one and the same, actually. Sorry for any confusion there.
Thank you. I'm glad that's cleared up. Thank you. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. Now we've got the answer. I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Manjon. Councillor Manjon. Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
4.
Councillor Fiona Martin.
4.
Councillor Helen Matthews.
4.
Councillor Steve McMillan is absent. Councillor Daniel McNally.
4.
Councillor Edward Mossop is absent now. Councillor Claire Newman.
4.
Councillor Sarah Parkin is absent. Councillor Julie Platt. 4. Councillor Paul Rickett.
4.
Councillor Phil Smith.
4.
Councillor Jim Swanson.
4.
Councillor Mel Turton-Levers is absent. Thank you. One moment, please, Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. That's carried 54, 5 absent.
Okay, thank you. So that's carried. Item 12 is motions on notice. There are none. So item 13 is questions to the council. To answer questions pursuant to the council procedure rule 11. Question number 1 is Councillor Bakinson Sanders to Councillor Leyland. Have you a supplementary?
Yeah, well, of course. We can't expect us not to have. Right. Whilst I understand your answer, I do think some councillors have been misled somewhat about the 33-67 arrangement. And perhaps after reading your answer, I'm going to ask you if you would agree that a 50-50 split of the costs would probably be more equitable. I can understand, whilst I understand it, I'm just talking about equality here.
So my iPad's in danger of running out of battery, and it would be most unfortunate halfway through a question. Excuse me a second. Thank you for your patience. Just in respect of your question, the split is based on population, as we explained before, and I think that's quite an appropriate way to do the maths on this, and it's something that has happened in other authorities where such things have to be considered. So the split is based on population, but in terms of the answer I gave, I'm quite happy to stand by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 2 is Councillor Alton to Councillor Leyland.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Leyland, for your reply.
Your supplementary.
I was just thanking you. Thank you very much for your reply, Councillor Leyland. I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying because I understand you were in discussions for quite some time over Boston and Horncastle, yet we only heard with 2 weeks to go. So if it's going to a leaders meeting, I think it's important, and obviously we trust our leader to inform us.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just reading your one of my disciples. That's slightly mischievous comment. In reality, in relation to your question, there are times when things have to be progressed before they can be made public, and that happens in a timely fashion when they can be made public. So I'm afraid I do stand by the original answer.
I expect nothing less.
All right, thank you. Councillor Alton to Councillor Marsh, please. Have your supplementary.
I am the supplementary. I do thank Councillor Marsh for his reply, and I will give him the exercise that I went through, and perhaps it can be sorted. But thank you, Councillor Marsh, for your reply.
Right, thank you. Question 4, Councillor Alton to Councillor Gray. Have your supplementary.
Yes, thank you. It does disturb me quite, as I did experience a situation myself at first hand when an elderly, vulnerable person took a phone call from a so-called company, and I would probably enjoy, or in fact not enjoy, that's the wrong word, I apologise, but perhaps have a chat with Councillor Gray as to what we can do to try and prevent this happening in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Horton. And we take these things very seriously, as you can see in our response. We're working closely with partners and the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. I think I've said in my response, a thing is coming out to all members in Members Point Bulletin at the end of this week. And I can also go on to say that we take it so seriously that we have arranged a meeting with the Deputy PCC to discuss how we can work even closer together.
Excellent. I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Question 5 is Councillor Alton to Councillor Kirk. Have your supplementary.
I am a supplementary, but I just do not agree with his answer. I'm afraid there are certain people need marketing situations, and we sell what we have, and our biggest income on the coast there is obviously tourism, and to change the name, I think, is just a downward step. Just a comment, not a question.
Okay. Question 6.
Councillor Andrews, I think it sounded to me like a statement that I should reply to with your
By all means.
Well, okay, he said it wasn't a question, Councillor Kirk, but if you wish to answer him, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think we need to think about where we are at the moment, because I take on board the question about having a tourism department that deals with tourism. But if we think about the excellent work we're currently doing, trying to extend the season to try and mitigate against some of the against COVID. Now, extending the season, I would say that's a tourism thing. But if you look at the disciplines within the council which have been involved, the economic development team, which is part of the growth, planning, it is much more now than just tourism. We support tourism in everything we do through our development service, but the development service uses whoever in the council is best placed and has the best knowledge and skills to drive things forward. So I think just having one person, 2 people, 3 people in a department called tourism doesn't do justice to the excellent work that the development service is doing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kirk. Perhaps you could have a chat with me afterwards, because I do not know the difference between growth and economic development.
Right, thank you.
So, Councillor.
Question 6, Councillor Alton to Councillor Leyland, please. Have you a supplementary?
No, I can understand the reply, which I thank him for. I'm just a little bit disappointed that the alliance, which is so important, is taking quite some time to come to scrutiny. If there are faults with what we've agreed, the deeper we're into it, the harder it is to get out. And I would have thought scrutiny being a very, very important part of this process would have been on the table now.
Okay, Councillor Alton. Anyway, question 7 is Councillor Alton to Councillor Leyland, please. Have your supplementary.
No, that's fine, and I appreciate his answer. Thank you very much indeed.
Right. Thank you. Question 8 is Councillor Alton to Councillor Marsh. Have your supplementary.
No, but once again, I do thank Councillor Marsh for his reply, and I will move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question 9 is
Chairman, can I just say he said move on. This is just trotting out 2 people just asking ridiculous questions. So I'll move that we move to next business, please.
No.
No.
I don't think we can, Councillor Marsh. We're nearly finished. Question 9 is Councillor Makin Sanders to Councillor Leyland, please.
Well, Councillor Leonard, I think you're being rather obtuse here. You haven't answered the question. I don't know. You might explain to me why you haven't. Section 151 officer and a monitoring officer are agreed at full council. I'm not talking about the names of them. I'm talking about the people inhabiting those jobs. There may be a management review in progress, but we don't know the details of any of that. And you haven't actually answered the question. Perhaps you might tell me why you don't want to answer the question.
So no intention not to answer the question, Councillor. The response is as given. There is a process involved and we are dealing with that as we're going on. We have an agenda item later on this evening which will clarify that further for you.
Okay, question 10 is Councillor Leonard to Councillor Leyland. Have your supplementary, please.
No, I don't on this one, thank you.
Right, thank you. Question 11 is Councillor Leonard to Councillor Fry. Have your supplementary.
Not on this one, thank you.
Thank you very much. Question 12, Councillor Leonard to Councillor Lane, and have your supplementary on this one.
Yes, I do actually. Obviously, we've had no scrutiny for Boston and the hierarchy. East Lindsey have been discussing this for 18 months. We as an independent group have an exemplar leader who's fully switched on with what's going on, and yet she only knew about the Boston merger less than 24 hours before it went to the media. So that is my case in point. So how do we answer that? How does Councillor answer that question in its entirety? Because it's indefensible that you've been discussing for something for 18 months, and yet our leader, I know she wasn't in post for 18 months, but she was in post for the latter decent time prior to that public announcement about the merger. So where was the actual information coming down the line to be then fed to us as district councillors? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for the supplementary. In respect of things that happen, there is always an appropriate time to make that information known. And that's, in that instance, was on that timescale. That's just the nature of these things that go forward. There's an appropriate time for that information to be made public to the backbenchers and to group leaders. And I'm quite happy to share information when it's appropriate to do so.
Okay, question 13 is Councillor Leonard to Councillor Leyland. Have your supplementary, please.
Yes, I do, thank you. The question is essentially, the only question is, does he agree that if the property is built at Horncastle, then obviously we're only going to be assessing it at the point it's being built. This is nearly £8.5 million worth of public money in very difficult times. And whilst he makes the point about how East Lindsey have worked well from Tedder Hall on a remote basis during COVID-19, it only proves that apart from the educational benefit, which we'll probably gain at Boston, the actual main part, 3/4 of the building, actually, we don't need it because we've managed remotely as we are from the site we are. So actually the only winner in this is going to be Boston College. Would you agree with that?
Councillor, a number of the things that you've said, I don't agree with. Your summation of the 8.5 million cost of this is not accurate. The reality is Boston College is an important part of this process. We will not be in this situation of working remotely forever. And I think the reality is we do need to get back to some sort of normality. And in fact, the government's now saying that we should be doing that. And there will be a need for office space. Now, you might have a point in terms of what that office space is in terms of its scale, but we are working with other partners in relation to the Boston hub, into the Horncastle hub, to see what other uses could be put in place there. And those discussions are ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 14 is Councillor Leonard to Councillor Fry. Have your supplementary, please.
Yes, I have, thank you. Basically, the question is, how do we justify the fact that an education provision is going to promote economic recovery? And that's what we're saying in this response, is the whole object is economic recovery. It's a position where it's ready to go in the future. But actually, how can an education provision, which is an extra, But something we, in respect of how East Lindsey works and the fact that we would be moving to that office space, is nothing more than what we already have now. So where's the economic recovery reappearing from moving one office to another venue, and also probably, I don't know, 50 students in a thing? Where's the economic recovery in that, please?
Sorry, the economic recovery is in the development itself. Obviously, building and construction will help the economy and will help the economy of Horncastle. Not only that, but it's actually cost neutral. This is costing us nothing, and it supports our carbon reduction aims and objectives. So really, I can't see why you're complaining about it.
All right, thank you. Last but not least, question 15. Councillor Mason-Sanders to Councillor Fry, please. Have your supplementary.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty amazed that Councillor Fry is amazed by my question. We're talking about public money here. I stress public and transparency. One line saying £750,000 isn't good enough, I'm afraid. And today we're looking at one redundancy. And again, I'm asking you to be honest with councillors. We're putting money into the 750k for all of this on that line. So why can Boston be privy to this information and not us?
Thank you very much, Councillor Makinson-Saunders. I object to your inference that I am not less than honest about things. I think that's a fairly disgusting thing, and I'd like an apology on that.
Well, I don't mean that at all.
Well, you shouldn't have said it then, should you?
No, well, I think we need to be honest with councillors. Need to be
I am
honest with
always
each other.
honest.
Well, I apologise if it upsets you. I'm sorry.
It does. It absolutely
I don't
does.
mean to be. I don't mean to be
I've
rude.
referred you to all the reasons, the rationale. I've referred to your own decisions on this one, and it covers the question. It covers your question, and you've just been extremely rude to me.
Well, I apologise for that. I don't intend to be. I'm sorry.
No.
But I just would like to know why Boston can have this information, but we can't, and that's the question I'm asking.
Do you wish to answer that, Councillor Fry?
All the information is there. It's the same memorandum of understanding which we approved and Boston approved. I don't know where this is coming from.
Well, that's what their council meeting last night was about. So once again, I apologise, and we'll have to leave it at that. So I'm sorry, I don't want to upset you.
Okay, thank you very much. We move on. I'm now going to take item 17, which is the date of the next meeting. The programme date for the next meeting of the council will be 14th of October 2020. And I would just like to propose, before we go into exempt information, we have a 3-minute break. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.